Good morning, students. So today you are once again welcomed on this online classes, and I hope that you are enjoying it and taking it seriously. Uh, in my earlier lecture, we have began the poem, Shakespeare poem, Went to the Session. Now, before we start the poem, uh, yesterday we have the reading out of that poem. I have recited the poem for you, and we have also marked the rhyming scheme of the poem. Now, before we start discussing the poem, I would like to tell you something about Shakespeare. Shakespeare is a great dramatist and poet of English literature. He belonged to the Elizabethan age. And it is particular because Elizabethan age means because he wrote his plays and poems when Queen Elizabeth was ruling the country. She was the Queen of England. So that is a important thing to remember. He was a poet and a dramatist. He was born at Stratford on Avon, Stratford on Avon, Stratford, Ford, Stratford on Avon, Avon. He moved to London in early age of his career. His early poems were circulated privately among his friends. He was not a popular poet in the beginning, so in a small circle, जैसे हम अपने मित्रों में कोई चीज़ डिस्ट्रीब्यूट करते हैं या सर्कुलेट करते हैं लाइक दैट his early poems were circulated among his friends because they were not published or they were not so popular. The English sonnet, which has a different rhyme scheme from the Petrarchan sonnet. As I told you earlier, Petrarch was the famous poet of Italy, and the sonnet has its origin from that country, from Italy, and Petrarchan sonnets were famous. But the Petrarchan sonnet has different rhyme scheme compared to the Shakespearean sonnet or English sonnets. Shakespearean sonnets, also known as the English sonnets. His plays are also identified with the greatness of Elizabethan rule because most of his writing, most of his works were published or staged on theatre when Queen Elizabethan was in rule. He also worked as an actor in the Globe Theatre. So the Shakespeare has a very practical experience of theatre. In his early life, he also acted in the theatre, in the plays, and he worked as a Globe actor. He worked as a Globe actor in the Globe Theatre. Love and courtship were the traditional subjects of the sonnet. Love, you know that, and courtship, this is a new word, Courtship. Courtship means in earlier days, the lovers were not so vocal or so open in expressing their love, and most of the gentry lived around the king and queens, and they lived in courts and darbars, and there is a decorum. There is a you can say that there is a system, and there is some manners of behaving or talking in the court. They are not so vocal, so open in expressing their feelings. So there is some hidden things, and they express is in indirect way. If they love and they want to express their love, they do it in an indirect way. So, love and courtship were the traditional subjects, traditional themes, old themes which were discussed in the sonnets. And it was Shakespeare who added the theme of friendship in it. He wrote around 54 sonnets in praise of his friend. 120 sonnets, I hope that. Some of which are addressed to a friend and others to a lady love. But the identity of that friend is not disclosed by the poet. He wrote many sonnets in praise of his friend. So I hope that, but Shakespeare is known for his plays. He is famous as a dramatist, but he was also a poet, and he wrote some very good sonnets, which are very popular. Uh, and the sonnet which are prescribed in your syllabus is Van to the Socians and Shall I compare? Yeah, Let Me Not to the Marriage of True Minds. But today we are going to discuss Van to the Sessions. This sonnet is addressed to a young man whose identity has not been disclosed by the poet. The poet does not name that poet in which appreciation, in whose appreciation he has written the poem. The poet pays him handsome compliments. The poet explains that whenever he thinks of his friend, he forgets about all his sufferings and losses. The death of his friend is such a great loss to him that other sufferings of the present time become insignificant. That whenever he recalls the memory of his friend, he forgets all about his present sufferings and losses. The poet describes that when he is in free mind, he recalls the sweet memory of the past. That it is his habit, it is his become a practice that whenever he is in free mind, he recalls the things of the past. So he regrets when he recalls, try to remember the past things, past time. He regrets over the loss of many things which he has possessed, which he possessed in the past, and at the present time he is not in possession of those things. The remembrance of past things make him more unhappy. He had expressed he had expressed sorrow over these losses in the past, but when he recalls its memory in the present time, tears comes out profusely. Profusely means without any obstacle, without any effort, profusely, smoothly. The tears comes out profusely from his eyes. In this way, his time is vested in weeping over old and new sufferings. So, so you must understand the old and new suffering. What is the old suffering? The old suffering refers to when he has lost his friend. He has also expressed his sorrow at that time. But today, after a gap of so many years, that's why the poem is title is Van to the Sessions. Van to the Sessions. Sessions, as I told you earlier, is a gap or interval. It may be the gap of a few hours, or it may be the gap of few days, or in this case, it is a gap of few years, of many years, you can say that. the gap of many years, that when he remembers, when he recalls the sweet memory of his friend, what happens? That the tears comes out profusely without any effort from his eyes, and he forgets all about his present suffering and losses, because the death of his friend is such a great loss to him that the present suffering, the present losses become insignificant or unimportant. I hope that we would continue to discuss the poem in my next lecture. So keep on watching the video series. Thank you.